Hello, friend. Welcome to History ZZZ. Get comfortable. Let your body settle into wherever you are resting. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands go still. Take one slow breath in and let it go. Tonight, I want to show you something. Imagine you are sitting at a long wooden table in a library. The room is quiet. High windows let in pale afternoon light. The smell of old paper is everywhere. That particular dry sweetness of vellum that has been kept in the dark for centuries. Someone places a book in front of you. It is not large, about the size of a modern paperback, thick with 240 pages of hand-cut vellum. The binding is worn, the pages are soft with age. You open it, and you cannot read a single word. Not because the language is obscure, not because the handwriting is cramped, but because the script itself, every character, every word, every line, is entirely unknown. No alphabet in the world matches it. No linguist has ever seen it before. You are looking at the Voynich Manuscript, and tonight we're going to sit with it together. The modern story of the Voynich Manuscript begins in 1912. Wilfrid Voynich was a Polish book dealer, the kind of obsessive collector who spent his life hunting rare manuscripts through the libraries of Europe. In that year, he visited the Villa Mondragone near Rome, where the Jesuit order was quietly selling parts of its collection to raise funds. Among the items for sale was a bundle of old manuscripts. Voynich bought them. When he sorted through his purchase later, one book stopped him. He had been dealing in rare manuscripts for decades. He could read Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic. He had seen medieval alchemical texts, illuminated psalters, encrypted diaries. Nothing prepared him for this. The script was unlike anything. The illustrations were unlike anything in European, Arabic, or Eastern manuscript tradition. He stared at it for a long time. Then he did what any reasonable person would do. He brought it to experts. The experts were baffled. He brought it to more experts. They were baffled too. The script itself is the first mystery. It flows left to right, like Latin or English. The characters are rounded and consistent. Whoever wrote this was not struggling with the letters. They wrote quickly, confidently, the way you write in a language you know well. There are between 20 and 30 distinct characters, depending on how you count certain variants. By comparison, the Latin alphabet has 26. The number is in the right range for an alphabet. Statistically, the text behaves like language. Some characters appear at the beginning of words, others appear at the end. Certain combinations repeat. The distribution of word lengths falls into a normal pattern. Something is being said here. The marks on this page are not random. They were put there by a mind that knew what it was doing. But no one has been able to determine what that mind was saying. The script has been analyzed by linguists, statisticians, and military cryptographers who broke German and Japanese codes during World War II. All of them agree. It follows the rules of language. None of them can read it. You look at the page in front of you. The ink is brown with age. The letters curl and loop across the vellum in long, confident lines. Someone knew what this said. They are the only one. Turn a few pages and the illustrations begin. The largest section of the Voynich manuscript is what scholars call the botanical section. Page after page of plants, roots, stems, leaves, flowers, seeds, drawn with careful attention to detail. The problem is that none of them are real. Botanists have spent decades trying to match the Voynich plants to known species. Occasionally a drawing will seem close. This one looks a little like a sunflower. That one resembles a root vegetable, but never quite matching. The plants have features that don't exist in nature. roots that spiral into spheres, leaves with the wrong pattern of veins, flowers on stalks that couldn't support them. Either the artist was drawing from imagination, or they were drawing plants from somewhere no botanist has ever found, or they were encoding something, using plant imagery as a system of symbols rather than a record of real things. No one knows. You look at one of the drawings now, a flower with 6 blue petals around a yellow center, rising from a root that loops into a perfect circle underground. It is beautiful, it is precise, it does not exist. Or perhaps it existed somewhere, once, in a world we have lost track of. Further into the manuscript, the astronomical section. Circular diagrams fill these pages, wheels within wheels, with stars marked by small drawings and text labels in the unknown script. Some of the diagrams look like star charts. Others look like calendars, or cosmological systems, or something else entirely. In several places, the sun and moon appear, recognizable symbols, the familiar round face of a sun with rays, a crescent moon. But the arrangements don't match any known astronomical system. Not Ptolemy's model, not Islamic astronomy, not the Aztec calendar, not Chinese star charts. A team of researchers once analyzed the star positions and concluded that the diagrams might represent a star map accurate to around 1200 CE, drawn from observations somewhere in Europe or the Middle East. Another team looked at the same diagrams and concluded they were entirely fictional. This happens constantly with the Voynich Manuscript. Every analysis produces a theory. Every theory is plausible. Every theory eventually collapses when examined closely. The manuscript holds its silence. The strangest section of all is what scholars call the balneological section. Balneology is the study of baths and bathing for therapeutic purposes. The name comes from the Latin word for bath. These pages show small human figures, dozens of them, women, rendered in a simplified medieval style, standing or floating in elaborate networks of interconnected pools and channels. The pools are green or blue. The channels branch and flow between them. The figures hold objects or gesture at one another, or simply float, serene and inexplicable. What does it mean? No one knows. Some researchers think it's a medical text about the female body, illustrated with symbolic bathing imagery. Others think it represents some kind of alchemical process, with the pools as vessels for transformation. Others have suggested it depicts a cosmological system, the movement of souls through some kind of spiritual journey. You look at one of the pages now. A small figure floats in a pool that connects to other pools that connect to others, the channels branching across the page like a river system seen from above. She looks peaceful. Whatever she is doing, she seems entirely comfortable with it. In 2009, researchers at the University of Arizona performed radiocarbon dating on 4 small samples of vellum from the manuscript. The result, the parchment was made between 1404 and 1438 CE. This was helpful. It placed the manuscript firmly in the early 15th century, Renaissance Italy, or possibly Central Europe. It ruled out the theory that the manuscript was a modern hoax. But it raised new questions. The vellum was made in that period. The ink is consistent with that period. The pigments used for the illustrations are consistent with that period. So someone in the early 15th century sat down with a blank book of expensive vellum. The parchment alone would have cost considerable money, and filled it with an unknown script and impossible illustrations. Why? The most straightforward answer is that the manuscript contains real information, encoded in a cipher to protect it from enemies or competitors, herbal remedies, alchemical formulas, astrological calculations, But if it is a cipher, no one has broken it. And ciphers of that era, while sometimes complex, have all eventually yielded to modern cryptanalysis. The Voynich Manuscript has not. During World War II, the United States military employed some of the most brilliant cryptographers in history. These were the people who broke Japanese naval codes, who cracked the encrypted communications of German U-boats, who helped turn the tide of the war by reading the enemy's secrets before they could be acted upon. In 1944, some of them took a look at the Voynich Manuscript. They failed. William Friedman, widely considered the greatest American cryptanalyst of the 20th century, worked on the manuscript for years. He organized study groups. He applied the most advanced statistical methods available at the time. He developed theories and tested them. At the end of his life, he wrote that he believed the manuscript was written in an artificial philosophical language, a constructed system rather than a natural one, which would explain why standard cryptanalytic methods failed. He never broke it. In recent years, AI language models have been applied to the text. Neural networks trained on hundreds of languages and scripts have analyzed the patterns. None have decoded it. The manuscript has been examined by more brilliant minds than almost any other document in history. It remains unread. The theories are extraordinary in their variety. The most conservative, the manuscript is a sophisticated hoax created by a medieval scribe to sell to a wealthy patron who would pay for something that looked like secret knowledge. The text is meaningless gibberish that mimics the statistical patterns of language without actually being language. The most romantic, the manuscript is a genuine record of knowledge from a lost civilization, a culture that left no other trace but this one strange book. In between, it could be an invented language created by a single person for private use. It could be a cipher so complex that no one has found the key. It could be a memory system, a mnemonic device where the text isn't meant to be read directly, but to trigger memories for the person who wrote it. It could be shorthand in a language that no longer exists. There is even a theory that it represents glossolalia, the speaking in tongues of a mystic who believed she was recording divine language. Each theory has evidence. Each theory has problems. None has been proven. The manuscript sits in a vault at the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University. High-resolution scans of every page are freely available online. It is the most studied, unread document in the world. There is one document that offers a clue to the manuscript's history, a letter. In 1666, a Bohemian alchemist named Georg Beresch wrote to Athanasius Kircher, a famous Jesuit scholar in Rome. Kircher was the leading expert of his era on ancient languages. He had attempted to decode Egyptian hieroglyphics, collected manuscripts from across the known world, and was consulted on anything mysterious or ancient. Beresch had the manuscript in his possession. He was desperate to understand it. He wrote to Kircher asking for help, describing the book as a medical or pharmaceutical work in an unknown script, filled with illustrations of exotic plants. Kircher appears to have written back, expressing interest. The manuscript eventually passed to a Bohemian nobleman named Georg Bartius, then to Kircher himself, and then into the Jesuit library in Rome, where Voynich found it 250 years later. So the trail goes. Someone unknown in the early 1400s creates the manuscript. It passes through unknown hands for 2 centuries. A confused alchemist in Prague writes to Rome for help. No help comes. The manuscript passes on. One more clue. A letter found with the manuscript when Voynich purchased it. The letter, dated 1665, claims that the manuscript was once owned by Emperor Rudolph II of the Holy Roman Empire. Rudolph ruled from Prague in the late 16th century and was famous for his extraordinary collections. He filled his castle with paintings, mechanical curiosities, astronomical instruments, and manuscripts from across the world. The letter claims Rudolph paid 600 gold ducats for the Voynich Manuscript, an enormous sum, enough to buy a modest estate. And the letter claims Rudolph believed it was the work of the philosopher and scientist Roger Bacon, who had died in 1294. This is now considered unlikely. The carbon dating places the vellum at 1404 to 1438, well after Bacon's death. But the story of Rudolph's purchase, if true, tells us something. Even in the 16th century, this manuscript was already old, already mysterious, already commanding extraordinary prices from people who believed it contained secret knowledge. Someone, somewhere, was willing to pay a fortune for a book they couldn't read. Perhaps because they believed that someday, someone would. Let us think about what it would mean to create an entirely new alphabet. Not just the letters, the visual forms of the characters, but the rules. Which letters can follow which, how words begin and end, what the rhythm of the language feels like on a page. Medieval scholars played with artificial languages. There were attempts to create universal philosophical languages, systems where each word's sound would reflect its meaning, making translation unnecessary. There were private codes, shorthand systems, alchemical notation, creating a convincing artificial language that mimics the statistical patterns of natural language, that feels like language when analyzed, that flows naturally on a page, is extraordinarily difficult. Modern linguists understand this deeply. And yet someone in the early 15th century apparently did exactly that. Or they wrote in a real language that no one has identified. Or they wrote in a cipher that no one has broken. Or they wrote meaningless marks that somehow, through coincidence, mimic the deep statistical patterns of human language. The manuscript offers no preference between these options. It simply lies there, open, waiting. In 2019, an artificial intelligence researcher at the University of Alberta published a paper claiming to have decoded the Voynich Manuscript. The AI identified the underlying language as Hebrew, written with an unusual encoding system that dropped vowels and changed certain consonants. The researchers produced what they called a translation of the first sentence. Other scholars looked at the translation and were skeptical. The Hebrew interpretation required so many adjustments and assumptions that critics argued the method could produce a plausible-sounding text from almost anything. This happens regularly with the Voynich Manuscript. A breakthrough is announced. The world pays attention. Other experts examine the work and find it unconvincing. In 2022, a different research team announced a statistical analysis suggesting the text might be a combination of two languages used simultaneously, a bilingual cipher of some kind. This theory, too, attracted interest. This theory, too, was not universally accepted. The manuscript accumulates theories the way a stone accumulates barnacles, slowly, steadily, without any of them changing what lies underneath. What lies underneath is still unknown. There is a section of the manuscript devoted to the zodiac. The 12 signs are arranged in circular medallions: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, the familiar wheel of the year. This much is recognizable. But around the central zodiac symbol, instead of the usual symbolic figures, there are small human faces. Dozens of tiny faces arranged in a ring, each one distinct, each one looking outward. What does this mean? The faces look like portraits. Are they the faces of people born under each sign? Are they representations of stars within each constellation? Are they something else entirely? Souls or spirits or symbols in a system we simply don't have the key to? The text beside them is in the unknown script. The faces look out at us with patient, slightly worn expressions. They have been looking out at whoever opens this page for 600 years. They will keep looking. Think about what vellum is. It is calfskin, prepared in a particular way. The skin is soaked, stretched on a frame while still wet, then scraped smooth with a curved blade as it dries. The result is a writing surface that is supple, durable, and expensive. In the early 15th century, a book of 240 pages of vellum represented considerable cost. You would need the skins of many calves. You would need a skilled vellum maker. You would need someone willing to pay for it. Whoever created the Voynich Manuscript had resources. They were not a poor person working in secret. They had access to good materials, the kind of materials that required either wealth or institutional support, and they chose to fill those expensive pages with something that has defied comprehension for 600 years. You run your finger along the edge of the page in your imagination. The vellum is cool and slightly soft. The ink is settled deep into the surface, permanent. Someone held this page before you, many someones across the centuries, all of them wondering the same thing you are wondering now. It is night now wherever the manuscript was created. Imagine the room, a scriptorium, perhaps, one of those monastic rooms designed specifically for the copying and creation of books. Long wooden desks with angled surfaces, small windows placed high to let in light without distraction, the smell of vellum and ink and candle tallow, or perhaps a private study, a scholar's room in a wealthy household with better candles, better materials, a fire in the hearth. The writer is working by lamplight. The quill moves steadily. The characters flow across the vellum with the ease of long practice. What is this person thinking about? Are they protecting something? Recording something they don't want others to find? Working through a system of thought that required its own language? Or are they doing something simpler and stranger than we can imagine? Something that made perfect sense in their world and makes no sense in ours? The candle burns low, the writer pauses, then continues. The most mundane theory, and perhaps the most likely, is this. The Voynich Manuscript is a medical or herbal text, recording plant-based remedies in a cipher or language designed to protect proprietary knowledge. In the medieval period, herbal medicine was serious business. The recipes for effective treatments were worth money. A physician or apothecary who had developed successful remedies might encode their knowledge to protect it from competitors. This would explain the botanical illustrations, records of the plants used. The astronomical section, astrology, was deeply integrated with medicine, determining which treatments were appropriate for which seasons and planetary alignments. The bathing section, hydrotherapy and mineral baths were significant medical treatments. It would explain why the vellum was expensive. This was a professional reference work worth investing in. It would explain the confident, practiced handwriting. This person had written in this system many times. And it would explain why no one has decoded it. The key died with the author. The most ordinary mystery, in some ways, is the hardest to accept. We want the Voynich Manuscript to be extraordinary. We want it to contain secrets worth keeping. Perhaps it does. Or perhaps it contains the private medical notes of a medieval physician who simply never expected anyone else to read them. You can look at the Voynich Manuscript right now. The Binek Library at Yale has made high-resolution scans of every page freely available. You can zoom in close enough to see individual brushstrokes in the illustrations, individual scratches from the quill on the vellum. A beautiful facsimile edition was published in 2016, printed on paper made to resemble the texture of the original vellum, with the illustrations reproduced in their original colors. And still, no one has read it. The democratization of access has produced thousands of amateur researchers, each bringing fresh eyes and different backgrounds, native speakers of obscure languages, people who have spent their lives with unusual scripts, retired cryptographers, monks fluent in medieval Latin. The manuscript has been examined by more people in the last 20 years than in the previous 500. It remains unread. Perhaps the key is in a document we haven't found yet. Perhaps the key is in a language that died before anyone thought to study it. Perhaps someone somewhere is holding a piece of paper that says in plain text exactly what the Voynich Manuscript means. They just don't know what they have. Close the book now. Not because the mystery is solved, not because we are done with it, but because the mystery is, in some ways, part of its value. There are very few things in the world that are genuinely unknown. Very few open questions that have resisted the combined attention of the world's brightest minds for 6 centuries. The Voynich Manuscript is one of them. In a world where information moves at the speed of light, where satellites can read a license plate from orbit, where the genomes of extinct species can be reconstructed from fragments of bone, in this world, a handwritten book from 1420 has not given up a single word. There is something almost restful about that. Not everything yields. Not every question has an answer we can reach. Some things keep their secrets, and the keeping itself becomes a kind of presence. A persistent reminder that the world is larger and stranger than our current ability to describe it. The manuscript lies in its climate-controlled case at Yale. The pages breathe slowly in the regulated air. The script waits. Let the mystery hold you for a moment. The strangeness of the world, the depth of what we don't know, the existence right now of a book that has been examined by the greatest minds across 6 centuries and has not revealed itself. This is not frightening. It is, in a way, one of the most hopeful things I know. It means the world is still surprising. It means there are still genuine puzzles. It means that human knowledge, vast as it is, has not yet swallowed everything. There are still depths it hasn't reached, corners it hasn't illuminated, languages it hasn't learned. Somewhere in those 240 pages, a voice is still speaking. We just haven't learned how to listen yet. Let that thought settle in with you now. The world is old and strange and still partly hidden. You are resting in it. You are part of it. Its mysteries are not threats. They are invitations to stay curious, to keep looking, to rest now and look again tomorrow. In the Voynich Library at Yale, the night security guard does his rounds. He passes the rare books reading room. He passes the cases of illuminated manuscripts. He passes the case where, in daylight, researchers come to look at one of the most famous documents in the world. The manuscript is there, sealed behind glass, in carefully regulated temperature and humidity. The guard doesn't think much about it. It's part of his route. But if you asked him, if you said, "That book there, in that case, no one has ever been able to read it, not in 600 years, he would probably pause. Look at the case, look at the closed book inside. And for a moment, he would feel what everyone who encounters the Voynich Manuscript eventually feels. a slight vertigo, a small but genuine encounter with the limits of what we know. He would continue his rounds. The book would remain. The night would pass, as nights do, over the long patience of unsolved things. Thank you for spending this night with the Voynich Manuscript. If you enjoyed this journey, History ZZZ has many more waiting for you. The mystery of Göbekli Tepe, the disappearance of the Roanoke colony, the eerie silence of the wow signal. Sleep well wherever you are. History ZZZ.